Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Centennial Institute's Issue Monday. If I have not met you yet, my name is Greg Schaller, and I'm the director of Centennial Institute. So we are very glad to have you joining us this evening. One sort of housekeeping or announcement about another event we have. Tomorrow at 12:15, actually in this room, some of you may be familiar if you're following the news about House Bill 251312, which is about misgendering and dead naming young people. And this bill has passed through the House, the State House, and is now likely going to be considered by the State Senate. If this bill passes, it's going to do great harm to religious liberty, free expression, and parental rights. And we are hosting an event here on campus with some of the leading people in the state of Colorado who are working against this bill. So again, that'll be at 12:15 here tomorrow if you're able to join us. As we do with all of our Centennial events, we begin with prayer, a pledge, and then an introduction of our speakers. So I'd like to bring up Brenna Nozo, Connor Posey, and Adrian Diaz-Ferreira to do those three things, and then we'll get started. Following the end of our talk, there will be probably 15 to 20 minutes for question and answer. So as you're listening to the presentation, be thinking about some questions you may have for our speaker.
If you'd all join with me in prayer. Lord, we thank you for this discussion that we are about to have tonight. We ask that our minds and our hearts would be open to the wisdom and knowledge that you have given Tim. Lord, I ask that we would learn and find tonight's information useful and that we would use it to glorify you. Thank you for this opportunity. Amen.
And then if you could please stand if you're able as we do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then place your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're doing all well. It is an honor to introduce our speaker today, Tim McTavish. Tim McTavish has faithfully and passionately served Colorado Christian University for over 15 years. He joined as a member of the Board of Trustees in 2009, serving and leading CCU students and faculty along the way. He stepped in as interim university president for 10 months with humility, wisdom, and dedication to Colorado Christian University's mission. Before CCU, Tim founded InsureMe in 1993, one of the first entrepreneurial ventures to connect insurance agents to prospect shopping for insurance. His hard work, dedication, and heart for Christ led InsureMe to be named one of the top 25 places to work in America and the most philanthropic small business in Colorado. Since then, Tim has continued his involvement with the entrepreneurial world, investing in new ventures and pouring into the next generation of leaders and entrepreneurs. He teaches personal finance here at CCU, in the School of Business and Leadership here at CCU. A class I would recommend everyone to take. I personally would take it twice if I could, but I can't, so. Tim and his wife, Pam, are proud CCU parents, raising 3 graduates from this very university. Together, they've modeled a life of service, generosity, and commitment to Christ-centered education. Please join in welcoming me, a friend, a mentor, and a faithful servant of Christ, Tim McTavish.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Greg Schaller, and your leadership of the Centennial Institute. It's an honor to share with you all this evening. Adrian leads our Bitcoin Club on campus. If after our talk you have questions, he's the guy to seek out. So thank you and welcome, and I'm glad you're here. A lot of exciting information to share. And so I'm going to just dive right in. We will have a time for Q&A at the end, so hold your questions till then. Maybe I will get to it. I will not answer every question you will have about this subject. I still have questions myself. So anyway, hopefully, though, you'll be inspired and learn some things and grow through that. There is a packet that you'll find if you didn't pick one up on the way in that has a number of resources. This will get you started down the Bitcoin rabbit hole pretty quickly if you want to go through some of those, both some videos and some books that I would highly recommend on our subject. Just a quick thing about me, yes, I sold an internet-based company in 2008 after starting it in 1993, and invested in a variety of projects. My wife and I were executive producers of the movie Sound of Freedom, and so just glad to be involved in a variety of things to help move culture in the right direction. And I have the privilege of teaching personal finance here at the university as well. My Bitcoin journey started in 2009 when I first heard about Bitcoin, and somebody said it was going to be what the internet is to money, and get in now. And I looked, and it was 10 cents. And I asked some people about, well, how do you buy this thing called Bitcoin? And the people I talked to said, don't touch that stuff. That's drug money. That's for criminals. That's not anything you want to be involved with. So I didn't, and received some of the worst financial advice of my life, and started learning a little bit more in 2019, reading a few books, and then finally about 18 months ago, I said, I really want to understand this. What's all the hype about? And so I learned a lot, reading a lot of books, watching a lot of YouTube videos, and fell down the rabbit hole in 2024, January of last year. Sorry, yeah. And my conviction is that Bitcoin is the most consequential innovation of my lifetime, and I hope to share that with you tonight. So why orange? Well, some years ago, somebody designed this logo you see in the upper right corner, and orange became the color of Bitcoin. So this tie is very intentional tonight. So, and that'll give you a little bit of a clue as to where I stand on the issue. This is a disclaimer here. This is not financial advice. This is not an endorsement by CCU or the Centennial Institute to invest in Bitcoin. This is for educational purposes only. So do with that what you will. So questions I have, and maybe you share some of these questions as well. Why does the cost of everything tend to go up? I mean, I remember buying a stamp when I was a child for 8 cents. It's now 78 cents, I think is what I saw last. 10x on stamps in 50 years. Candy bars, I remember buying candy bars for a nickel. That wasn't that long. You might remember cheaper than that, some of you. Why do candy bars cost 75 cents today and more? Wages go up. I got my first job earning $3.35 an hour and thought that was good money. Why do wages always go up? Houses, the house my wife and I first bought 35 years ago, $40,000 condominium. It sells today for about 8 times that amount. Everything tends to go up. And why do we even have this thing called 2% inflation? And is it really even 2%? Where did that number come from? And why does the government have so much debt and so little to show for it? Why is the middle class being squeezed with spouses working and never seeming to make ends meet? And then finally, why is it so expensive to raise a family, and family sizes getting smaller, and all kinds of issues? And what do all of these issues have in common? They all deal with money. Money. And I wonder, could it be that the financial challenges we face trace back to the money itself? Here's our agenda. Why do we need and use money? What is money? How is our current monetary system broken? Why Bitcoin is the best money ever? And some consequential implications of a Bitcoin world. Why money? Why do we have this thing called money? Well, I'd like to take us a far step back to the foundation, to creation itself, and say that you are created in the image of Almighty God. What does that mean? That means all kinds of things. But one thing we see in the Genesis record is that the God who is sovereign over all gave dominion to his creatures. And he said, over the birds of the air and the beasts of the field, have dominion to rule. Now, interestingly, you will find that in this command to rule and to have dominion, there is not dominion over one another. Adam was not to have dominion over Eve or vice versa. They were to be a pair, to work together. So, when it comes to thinking about what it means to have individual sovereignty, for each person to be created with sovereign rights in the image of God, something our country was founded upon, it goes all the way back to the creation account, and it gets to the point then that, well, if I want you to do something for me, I've got to enter into trade negotiations. I must treat you as one sovereign to another. I can't enslave you. That's why it becomes such an abomination for slavery, because it demeans the image of God in others. How can we have a system where I can encourage you to do something for me and vice versa? Well, that's where money comes in. Even in my trade negotiations, if my trade with you honors the sovereign dignity that you have within you, then I am honoring the image of God in you, treating you fairly in how we measure things. Scripture speaks a fair bit about this. A couple of verses that I've highlighted here from Proverbs 20:10. Unequal weights and unequal measures are both alike, an abomination to the Lord. You shall not have in your bag two kinds of weights, a large and a small. You shall not have in your house two kinds of measures, a large and a small. A full and fair weight you shall have, a full and fair measure you shall have, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. For all who do such things, all who act dishonestly, are an abomination to the Lord. Interestingly, what was the context of this? Well, in ancient times, people would trade with one another, and they would trade with their gold, their silver, their flour, their whatever it was that they were trading with. And if I put it on the scales, maybe I have a counterweight that's 90% of what the real weight was supposed to be. And, see, I'm giving you a fair exchange. No, that's an unequal weight and measure. God says that's an abomination. Why? Because we are demeaning the image of God in one another through the currency that we use if we're trying to defraud somebody else in the process. So does God care about money? I think he cares about money. I think it shows in Scripture that God cares about what kind of currency we use and how honest we are with one another in our trade negotiations. So then it begs the question, well, what is money? I mean, we work for it. A lot of time we put in working for that paycheck. We get it, we spend it, we save it, we give it, we do all kinds of things with it. But what is money? Do we really even stop and ask the question? Money is many things. It has several characteristics. One is that it's a medium of exchange. And as a medium of exchange, it's basically the currency. It's the most saleable good where I can quickly sell it for something else that I might want versus what you might want. So let's say there's this coincidence of wants that would happen in an economy where I am an apple grower and I have my apples that I want to sell, and I also want a house built. You're the construction worker. How many apples can you eat? And are those apples going to be fresh all the way along the way, that the time that it's going to take to construct my house? And yet, money solves this problem for us. We can exchange for money with this thing that I can collect money by selling my apples, use that to pay for my house. The construction worker can use that money to buy the things that they want. So we eliminate the coincidence of wants through money. It's a unit of account that helps us keep track of and price things. We can assess how much value is this? In fact, we look at things today and we determine by dollars, well, how much is that worth? Oh, that's too expensive. I don't think I'm going to buy it. It's a store of value. You can accumulate money. Money sits in your bank account. You look at those numbers and you say, I've got some money there. And it's a store of value that we have, that we track our income by. And the better the store of value, the better the money. Society has used all kinds of different forms of money over the years. Shells, beads, whales' teeth in some cultures, cigarettes maybe in prison. All kinds of things can be used as money. Gold and precious metals have been used as money. I'll touch on that in just a moment. Pieces of paper, IOUs, have been able to serve as money. And today we basically have ledgers on accounts and through computer systems that keep track of all the IOUs from one to another. We use our stocks as money, our real estate as money. It's maybe not the most liquid, but we hold these assets as a store of value because we know one day we are going to sell those stocks. We're going to sell that real estate. But in the meantime, it's a great store of value. So money, good money, has many good characteristics. It retains its value. It's durable, portable, divisible, scarce, fungible, and accepted. And people always gravitate to sound money. We don't trade with beads anymore. We don't trade seashells anymore. Why? Because we found better sources of money. Gold has been a good source of money over the millennia. Why? Why has gold been such a good source? Well, it's limited in supply. The total increase in gold has never exceeded 3% added to the supply in any one year. Typically, it's between 1% and 2% increase in the supply. It's durable. It doesn't rust. It doesn't disintegrate, get destroyed. It's very durable. I can verify that it is what it is. I might have to melt it down, but I can verify that it is gold. It's portable, sort of, depending on how much I'm using and how little or how much I want to use of my gold. It can be a good portability of money as well. Somewhat divisible in the same respect because, again, maybe it's a small gold coin, maybe it's a big block of gold, but gold can be used as money. So you might ask, well, why don't we use gold as money today? Well, it's basically too restrictive on government spending, which I'll touch on in just a moment. It has physical limitations, as I've mentioned before, including confiscation. And that's why it basically got to the point where people said, hey, let's just put our gold in the bank, and the bank will give us these pieces of paper as a demand deposit to go get the gold back if and when we need it. That's how we transitioned into having the paper money that we have that was intended initially to be backed by gold. So with that, I'd like to give you a brief history of the US dollar. And while it was never fixed in supply, initially the dollar was secured by the value of silver, gold, and copper because it was silver, gold, and copper. And it was the U.S. that set the standard for how much gold was in a gold piece, how much silver was in a silver dollar, how much copper was in a penny. And by having the measures and the standards set by the U.S. Mint, they were the ones who determined how much gold was in each of those pieces. The U.S. Constitution even declares that no state shall make anything but gold or silver coin in tender in payment of its debts. So back then, even then, the issue for states settling debts with the federal government, you have to pay it off in silver and gold. Any increase in the money supply would then come at the cost of paying with a proof of work, if you will, for the miners to extract the limited resource from the ground and process it. So if you wanted to increase the amount of silver dollars, you had to go out and buy some silver from the silver miners. and that was the process. In 1792, the Coinage Act was passed, and it established the US dollar as the national currency, and again, established on silver and copper and gold, and the government guaranteed its authenticity. In 1861 is when greenbacks were created. This was paper money and demand for the deposits held at the bank. And at the time, the US government established that a dollar would convert to $20.67 of dollars would be converted for an ounce of gold. To cover the cost of the war, banks were soon only required to hold 25% of their reserves in deposit against those notes. In 1913, the Federal Reserve Bank was established, and again, it set the banking requirements for how much a bank was to hold in reserves, and at that time, 25% was again the minimum requirement. And it has fluctuated from up to as much as 40% required to today's level of 0. In 1934, the Gold Reserve Act was passed, and in that, followed up by an executive order where Roosevelt said it was illegal to own gold. People had to surrender all their gold to the bank to get money for their gold. Then in 1934, a year later, the Treasury Department said, thank you, banks, we will take all that gold, we will put it in a place that we're going to create called Fort Knox, and we will put all the gold there. And so banks, and then simultaneously that year, gold magically increased from $20.67 per ounce to $35 per ounce for the value of a dollar. In 1971, Nixon ended the gold standard altogether. So, how has the US dollar fared relative to gold? Today, gold is trading at about $3,200 per ounce. Since 1933, the US dollar has lost 150 times its value relative to an ounce of gold. Since 1971, it's lost 90 times its value. And today, the value of all the gold in Fort Knox at $3,200 an ounce is less than 2% of all the dollars in circulation. To give you a visual as to how that compares to real estate prices, you look at your home, and the average house has appreciated significantly in dollar terms. Compared to gold, the median price of a home is lower. So despite the thought that housing is, and it has been a good investment, especially when we can borrow at 3 and 4% money, in dollar terms, housing goes up. In gold terms, housing costs have gone down. So, why has the money increased? And how much has it increased? Since moving off the gold standard, the average annual increase compounded annually is 6.75% increase in the money supply. And you can see the big spike in 2020 when a third of all the money ever in circulation was printed since COVID. And that is what I would call a more accurate representation of what true inflation is. It is not 2%. 2% is a CPI number that gets kind of measured in a variety of different ways, but the reality is things should be getting cheaper. Economies of scale, innovations, new ways and technologies of doing things. Why is it that our dollars lose purchasing power instead of gaining? Because we've printed nearly 7% per year on an annualized basis. And I would call a zero-cost increase in the money supply currency debasement. We know it all too well as inflation. So what causes the money supply to increase? In a word, debt. All debt increases the money supply. Why is that? Borrowing increases the money supply when the lender has less than 100% in reserves. This is called fractional reserve banking. This applies to all debt, Our national debt, consumer debt, mortgage debt, credit card debt, auto loans, all debt is debt that banks do not have to hold 100% in reserves and can lend out more. So this is known as the money multiplier. Again, today's bank reserve requirements is 0%. The Federal Reserve Bank does not require banks have any reserves at the local bank. Now, banks are still encouraged to show a profit, still encouraged to justify their loans to make money and not be a drain on the system. But the average bank today across all banks in the US has 18% of their loans as reserves in the bank. As of January, that money multiplier was 3.84 times, meaning you deposit $1,000 in the bank, 3,840 gets lent out to others when they borrow. Fractional reserve banking provides lower than market interest rates for the borrower. Think about it. If the lender is lending out 3 to 4 times on the deposits, they can lend at a much more competitive, lower interest rate than if they had to hold 100% in reserves. So the bank and the borrower benefit in this relationship because people can borrow at lower rates than otherwise. So who bears the cost of fractional reserve banking? Well, we all do when it comes to inflation. We all bear the cost of higher goods and services year after year after year. But many of us have offset those assets through other investments, real estate, stocks. And if we've used leverage in that process, we've probably benefited all the more. Those who without access to debt are the ones who bear the greatest cost. They are unable to purchase hard assets with leverage. They require more government services to balance the scales. Bigger government equals more debt, and the cycle continues as government spends more and inflation continues. We see today, too, that the Fed drives the economy. The Federal Reserve Bank, the Fed chairman, lowers the interest rates by 1/4 point and the stock market goes crazy. It goes up by 1/4 point and people freak out. Recession is coming. 1/4 point interest rate makes all the difference in the world. And what's affected? Everything. Stock market, real estate, corporate expansion. It affects our inflation, jobs, all kinds of things. So one takeaway that I want you to really just get in your mind is that increased debt increases the money supply, which is inflation. And I would ask you, is that transitory? Many of you here have seen how things have changed over many years, many decades of time. Things are much more expensive. How and why has that occurred? Debt. So inflation will only reverse when national, institutional, commercial, consumer, and mortgage debt decreases. Is that going to happen? This is our federal debt, and as compared to the M2 money supply, federal debt just keeps climbing. It now exceeds the white in that chart at over $36.5 trillion and climbing. So, is this a problem? I mean, we're in America. Is it really a big deal? Well, again, I would say it depends on how you've leveraged the system. And I use that word intentionally. If you borrowed at 3 and 4% on a 30-year mortgage and your house went up 6% every year, you did okay. You bought some rental properties and they're paying the mortgage for you, you're probably doing all right. You borrowed on a low interest margin account on your stock portfolio, stocks are going up 10% on the S&P, you're probably doing okay. Who's bearing the cost of this. Again, real estate prices have gone up substantially, 16 times for the median priced home since 1970 in the last 50 years in dollar terms. But what is the result? I would say that some of the results is that there's been an increase in the wealth gap, a squeeze of the middle class. I work with young people and see it here, and you hear the stories too, calls for socialism. Why? Because young people are saying, when am I ever going to be able to afford a house? How come they won't pay me a living wage? How come I have to have both spouses? When are we ever going to be able to start a family? It's very difficult for young people and those without access to debt especially. That leads to increased government spending on entitlements, which guess what? Leads to more debt and more spending. In fact, when it comes to the political sides of the thing, hey, we'll give you $25,000 for your starter home. We'll pay off those student loans. Is that going to answer and solve the deeper root of the problem? No, that's just going to cause greater debt for our government. And on the other side, hey, let's lower taxes. Let's get that money back into the economy. I love that message. Is it going to solve the problem? Not when we can't pay our bills. The result, increased debt, ongoing inflation, political unrest, bigger government needed to solve the problem. So have we fallen for what I would call the Keynesian lie and the debt and a debasement of our currency by increasing the money supply leads to prosperity? And I want you to question, does simply printing money create more goods and services in the economy? Scripture tells us that when the Lord was sharing his blessings with Israel, he said, "For the Lord your God will bless you as he promised you, and you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow, and you shall rule over many nations, but they shall not rule over you." We are a nation with $36 trillion of debt, with $2 trillion a year being added to that debt. I wonder, have we fallen for the Keynesian lie? Is there a solution to the global fiat debt trap? It's been staring at us in the face the whole time. Yes, it is Bitcoin. So I wanted to share the problem so you understood the context for how and why Bitcoin was launched in 2008, early 2009, after the financial crisis at that time. So what is Bitcoin? Well, first off, it is not the gospel of Jesus Christ. There is only one Savior that's going to redeem all things and restore all things and make all things new. So do not confuse Bitcoin with that message in any way. But I will say, Bitcoin is pretty good news. So what is Bitcoin? It is the best money ever. What do I mean by that? It is scarce. There is a fixed supply that cannot be increased. It is portable. It's effortless to move and to store with negligible costs. It's divisible, infinitely divisible from micropayments or billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's durable. As long as there's electricity, it will never cease to exist. It's fungible, meaning that every Bitcoin's as good as the other. It's accepted, getting more and more acceptability. Think about Bitcoin. It was launched in 2009. 16 years later, one of the largest assets in the world, no marketing team, no group behind it, just a computer protocol. And it's gaining acceptance every day. Censorship resistant. It's a bearer asset. You hold it, nobody can take it away from you. If you hold the keys to your Bitcoin, nobody can take it from you. Nobody can keep you from transacting in it. And best of all, it is decentralized. No government can control it. No central bank can oversee it. No group, no corporation, no person, no 51% shareholder. No, nothing can change Bitcoin. It operates by consensus. So what is Bitcoin? It's a computer program. It was launched in 2009 by an alias named Satoshi Nakamoto and done in collaboration with dozens of others who had been talking about how to create a kind of global money. And he's the one who came up with the innovation that we now call Bitcoin, using cryptography and the internet. What is the sole objective? Decentralized, scarce digital money enabling peer-to-peer transactions secured by energy, verified by distributed ledger holders. I'll unpack that for you. Decentralized. No one owns or controls Bitcoin. Again, no government, central bank, corporation, entity, person. Anyone can download the computer program and run the protocol on their computer. This is called a node on the network. There are currently over 20,000 nodes around the world that operate a full ledger of the node, keeping track of every transaction since 2009. Nodes validate the transactions and update the public ledger. It is scarce. The protocol sets the cap and the mining distribution rate. There are a cap of 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be minted is the cap. We are currently at 19,850,000. The remaining 1.15 million, almost 5%, will be mined over the next 110 years. A Bitcoin can be subdivided into 100 millionths. These are now referred to as Satoshis or sats. So think 2.4 or 2.1 quadrillion sats on the Bitcoin network. And theoretically, this could be subdivided even further if necessary. This chart shows an example of the distribution rate. So miners, which I'll unpack in just a moment, go through a process of mining Bitcoin. That brings more Bitcoin into circulation. And again, we are at roughly 95% today. The next 3 years, we'll mine another 2.5%. And then it's just working for the next 100 years on the last 1.5% or so of the Bitcoin to be mined. It is digital. Bitcoin are held in addresses in the cloud, as it were, recorded on the ledgers of every node. So a private cryptographic digital key is required. Think of it as a password, is required to move your Bitcoin from one address to another address on the Bitcoin network. Whoever holds the keys controls the Bitcoin at that address. There's a saying in the space, not your keys, not your coin. So you want to make sure there's no other third party involved. You hold the keys to the Bitcoin you hold on the Bitcoin network. That's why you find some people trying to dig through landfills, trying to find their laptop that they said they had some Bitcoin keys on, because they have their keys on their laptop. If you lose your keys, that Bitcoin is gone forever. Secured by energy. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, but I do want to unpack the mining process just a little bit, because this is quite a significant part of the innovation of Bitcoin. Mining, as you've probably heard about, Bitcoin. What's a Bitcoin miner? It's a person running a computer program, and in this computer process that they run, they spend a lot of electricity running this computer program in hopes of winning a lottery of sorts. They run a hash process that's trying to find a certain range of numbers. And they have to keep running the process thousands and trillions of times before they strike the right number. This is Bitcoin's proof of work and what sets it apart from all other cryptocurrencies. Other cryptocurrencies that you might hear about might have a place in solving and doing something useful, but they're not meant to be global money. Global money requires proof of work, because you have to be able to show that you didn't, that you can't counterfeit this, you can't just pull it out of thin air. it has to be something that requires some energy, so it requires electricity. And I think it's also important to note that no one has ever been given Bitcoin. A miner mined for Bitcoin. All the Bitcoin that has ever come about originally was mined by some computer running this mining process that won the lottery in this process, and then maybe they then sold their Bitcoin for cash or did some other things with it, and now it's in circulation. So a little bit about this process again. So the lottery winner, and this happens roughly about every 10 minutes, is about how complex the process is for all the computing power that is happening across the globe. Takes about 10 minutes to get the lucky number. They collect all the transactions from the different nodes that are broadcasting those transactions. They couple that together, add their fee to it, and then they announce, hey, I won the lottery. And they're able to show through the process, yes, very quickly, they won the lottery. They broadcast that out. They give themselves today 3.125 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. That's the distribution rate according to the protocol. That equates to roughly $275,000 in today's terms to win the block reward for that 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, roughly $275,000 of Bitcoin is being awarded to a lucky miner. That miner stamps it with a timestamp and a unique identifier, appending it to the previous blockchain or a block, and that becomes part of the blockchain. And they announce what the next stamp is going to be for the next miner to add to it. They then broadcast this back to those 20,000 nodes. Those 20,000 nodes who keep track of all the ledger, they take a look at that and they validate everything that the miner has testified about. They said, did this miner really win the lottery? And that's easily verifiable. They say, are all the transactions in this block valid? If there is one thing that is out of place, the node will not broadcast this transaction. And if the nodes don't broadcast the transaction, they wait for the next honest miner to come around and give an honest ledger transaction. The miner's incented with $275,000 worth of value to be honest with every transaction he's reporting. If one of them is wrong, and so he has to validate the ledger as well. So everyone is validating the ledger, making sure that everything is correct. If everything checks out, the nodes pass it on, it gets stamped, it gets included, that becomes part of the blockchain. If something's amiss, we wait for the next miner to give us a good block entry that gets added to the ledgers. So, as you can see, if you like checks and balances, you would love Bitcoin. So what is Bitcoin? Again, it is decentralized, scarce digital money enabling peer-to-peer transactions secured by energy, verified by distributed ledger holders. While I'm on that, I will say again that there is only one Bitcoin. Of all of what's considered cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is about 60% of the market cap of all the investment in all cryptocurrencies. All of the others combined are 40%, and there's a handful of leading ones within there. There are a handful of good projects doing great things, providing value. Whether their price is justified, I can't say, but there is only one Bitcoin, only one type of coin that is intended to be global money, and that is Bitcoin. The others are meant to be doing, some other things, some other process to provide some kind of service to something. So, don't be fooled, and don't be concerned about, or don't look into the other. If you look into the other, don't invest in the others until you've understood what it is you're buying. So, where are we at today with Bitcoin? Well, today, it's roughly about $84,000 for one full Bitcoin. But remember, one Bitcoin can be divided into 100 millionths. So you can buy as much or little of Bitcoin as you want. 1 penny will buy you 12 sats. And so the value of the entire Bitcoin network with the total distribution of 19.85 million Bitcoin in distribution at that $85,000 level, it's about a $1.7 trillion asset. It runs on the largest, most decentralized computer network in the world. Today, 1 in 7 Americans own Bitcoin in one form or another. It is growing by a growth rate of 35% annually. And the largest demographic are males ages 31 to 35 who own about 40% of Bitcoin in America. By market cap, it is the 8th largest asset in the world, right about the value of all the silver in the world, and not too far behind Amazon. So as I kind of wrap up, I would just like to say, and we'll have again some time for Q&A, but I would like to suggest that Bitcoin redeems broken fiat money. Our current financial system is not an equal weight and measure. People spend their entire lives working for fiat dollars that are simply printed out of thin air by the indebtedness of others, and especially by our own government debt. And when government spending is considered an asset, that is even more of a problem. Until Bitcoin, people had no other option but to participate in and perpetuate the money printing. In fact, if you were to get ahead, you needed to borrow money to get a house, to get some things, to get some assets. It was difficult to get ahead without leveraging the system. But Bitcoin is money that restores honest weights and measures in our financial systems in America and globally. Globally, by the fact that in America, our printing is around 7% per year. The global average is 14% per year. You think we've got inflation problems? We've got it pretty good compared to the rest of the world. Hence, that's why maybe for some of you, you were wondering, do I really need this Bitcoin thing? Maybe you don't. But I can tell you, other countries of the world are seriously migrating toward Bitcoin. Bitcoin redeems broken fiat money because it is the best technology to promote individual sovereignty and property rights of every person with property that cannot be debased or stolen, and allows them the freedom of expression to decide how, when, and to whom they will spend their sats. Nothing will help the world's poor to restore the middle class more in America than to give them a chance to easily engage in the global economy with money that they can store that cannot be debased or controlled by the dictates of banks and governments. Sorry. I titled my talk, The Most Consequential Innovation. Really? Is it the most consequential? I would say that we have never, as a human race, had something where we had an asset that had absolute scarcity that could be used as money. Even gold in its limited supply could always be found more in a 1 to 3% inflation rate. So what does it mean to have something that is completely scarce when everything will be measured in Bitcoin rather than dollars that magically get printed? For example, suppose of the 85 million single-family homes in America, we started considering those, just that one asset in Bitcoin terms. 85 million divided by 21, I get roughly a fourth of a Bitcoin for the average house. The most consequential innovation? Well, a distributed trusted ledger. What could that do for us? Guatemala last year in its voting process said, we have had challenges with people thinking that we don't have voter integrity. What should we do about this? Is there a place we can go, a corporation we could trust? No, can't trust a corporation. Can't trust anybody. We can trust Bitcoin. They had polling stations where every polling station captured the votes of about 300 people on average, uploaded a signature of that to the Bitcoin blockchain, and their election process was validated within an hour of the closing of their elections, and completely trusted. When we have something that's can be time-stamped and recorded, there's industries being built now that are trying to understand what can we do to build an industry around something where we can validate that this really did occur. You know, the Holocaust really happened, or whatever, right? I mean, there could be all kinds of things that you could say, did this occur? We write a record of it on the blockchain that can never be destroyed, that's distributed all across the globe. Instant global settlement without centralized intermediaries, freely moving billions and billions of dollars within minutes, from nation to nation, corporation to corporation. We've got some financial systems in place that will handle a lot of that sort of thing today, but it takes days. What about being able to, nations saying, we're not going to allow that transaction to go through? We're not going to approve that transaction? What happens when that can't be stopped anymore? The global mining race is going to, already is searching for as much energy as it can possibly find, cheap energy, abandoned energy. Already electric rates are coming down everywhere. Why? Because Bitcoin miners can turn off and on their mining processes at will, bringing electric rates down across the globe. Places that have never received electricity, places in Africa, are getting mining equipment there to provide electricity to their neighborhoods, to their homes, all built on Bitcoin. And now, because they've also got satellite transmissions, they've got internet access, the world's coming to the poor through Bitcoin. Unobstructed property rights in a non-depreciating, ever-appreciating asset. Under a Bitcoin standard, the purchasing power of Bitcoin grows with the global GDP. If we get to the point where Bitcoin is the money that the world uses, my belief would be then that at that point, the purchasing power of Bitcoin continues to increase year after year after year with global GDP. So just holding money in savings will gain greater purchasing power. What will that do socially when people crying out for socialism as the answer realize they've got property that cannot be taken, that cannot be stolen from them, that they can hold forever? Might that be the end of socialism? All kinds of goods and services, as people will have to raise the bar, what's it going to take to get that Bitcoin from that person when that Bitcoin is worth so much? Limits on government powers. We're already seeing that. More fiat indebtedness, no more fiat indebtedness that wouldn't be backed by Bitcoin. Already, countries are saying, U.S., we're not sure we even like your 10-year treasuries anymore. We don't like your bonds. Your money at 36 trillion and climbing doesn't seem very stable. We think we might want to invest elsewhere. What's that alternative? Bitcoin is the thing that many are gravitating to. So it will force governments to reduce spending. It will, I believe, eliminate sales and income taxes one day, because, again, there will be a day when people will be able to freely transact peer-to-peer. And so then taxes will have to be done through assessments. I think borders will become less of an issue as people got the ability to take their wealth with them with a memorized password and go wherever they want in the world and set up wherever they find freedom. All kinds of implications that will come about because of sound money. So, in conclusion, I would just like to end with, you are a sovereign individual created in the image of Almighty God, transacting with co-sovereigns using equal weights and measures honors the dignity and sovereignty of others. And Bitcoin is the best weight and measure / money devised. With that, we're going to, I have the resources on that piece of paper. You can check that out. And then we'll take some Q&A. And I know there's some others here that are also Bitcoin experts. Feel free to chime in and help me out too. So, question? Yes. Okay. Up here in the front. Okay.
What does fungible mean, and what do you mean by fiat money?
Oh, great question. So what does fungible mean? Fungible is that my $1 bill is as good as somebody else's $1 bill. It's so fungible just means I can use any derivative of that money and it will be accepted. Fiat means by decree, and fiat money is money that typically government money, the governments of the world who say, we declare this to be our money and to be worth something. Yes. All right, couple questions there. Okay, Kara.
So can it be left in your estate? And if you have multiple heirs, do they each get a piece of that Bitcoin? How does that work?
So can it be left in your estate? You control, if you own, there's a couple of ways to own Bitcoin. One is where you have control of the keys and you have the Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network. And how that, typically today when you go to buy Bitcoin, perhaps through an exchange, you would end up declaring how you want that titled, and then that Bitcoin would transfer accordingly to whomever in your estate planning or whatnot. But it's really the keys would transfer. The Bitcoin still stays at that address on the Bitcoin network until the password is used to move it from that address to some other address on the Bitcoin network. So essentially, through your estate planning, you would give instructions as to how you would want those keys transferred to somebody else. Yeah. There. I don't know. Go ahead.
Tim, I'd like to add a few things to it was a great presentation. I like to make two quick points to the group. One, there's a real easy way to buy a Bitcoin today. I buy it in my Schwab account. There's exchange-traded funds now that buy just Bitcoin. So I've got accounts at Schwab, and you can have them at Fidelity and many other places, and you can buy Bitcoin just like you buy a stock.
Yes.
So that's an easy way to buy it. The other thing I thought I would mention, just mining is confusing. And the way I've described it to others, it's more like a bunch of auditors, okay? And what the miners are doing is auditing the transactions before they're put on the books. Well, the ledger is a set of books.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything that goes on has been audited prior to it being posted. So you can't double count. So anyway, those are a couple comments.
Yeah, those are good clarifications. So yes, one way to purchase, and the easiest way to get Bitcoin exposure, I would call it, is through the ETFs. There's 11 ETFs out there today that all they do is buy and hold Bitcoin. And so it will trade exactly up and down with the swings of Bitcoin that you would buy separately. That's the easiest way through your brokerage account to acquire Bitcoin exposure, I would call it. To actually, again, keep in mind, they hold the keys. So should something happen, and depending on your concerns about that, if somebody said, we don't like Tim's political views and we're going to seize his assets. Well, now I can't liquidate my Bitcoin because it's held at the Schwab account and I'm on the bad list. And so, whereas if I held the keys on the Bitcoin network, I can have access to those funds anytime I want.
My question's related. There have been lots of frauds within cybercurrency. Is there risk? What are the risks with other cybercurrencies, and is there risk of fraud with Bitcoin?
Yeah. So, is there risk of fraud with Bitcoin? Well, the Bitcoin network itself has never been hacked. What has been hacked are people losing their keys. If I stored that password on my computer and somebody gained access to my computer somehow and found that, they could then get my Bitcoin. So a person who would really want, if they're going to hold a significant amount of Bitcoin, they would really want to ensure that that is completely offline, has never touched the internet. There are companies that will help set you up with those kinds of ways of holding it. Otherwise, yes, if you just trust the folks running the exchange traded fund through your Schwab account or Fidelity account and want to do it that way, they hold the keys, and then you don't have to worry about that side of things. So.
What about fraud and other cybercurrencies?
I can't speak to the other cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin has never been hacked. What has been hacked are people who have lost their keys, or some fraudsters who said, "Hey, we buy Bitcoin for people," and then they didn't buy Bitcoin for people. So that's occurred too. Yeah, Charlie? Okay. Yeah, get fish. You know, where you get scammed in some way to where they say, "Hey, we understand there's a virus on your computer. You know, we need you to download this," or So all kinds of different ways that you could get taken, where they gain access to your private keys. That's the greatest risk. Okay, here's a microphone there. Yeah.
Yes, could you talk about the overlay of the volatility of Bitcoin prices versus the store of value? So, a month and a half ago, it was $110,000 down to $84,000. People lost a lot of value in that period of time.
Yes. So volatility. Now, volatility is, again, measured perhaps against a dollar. Is what we're measuring in that sense. The highest for Bitcoin at Trump's inauguration, it hit 109,000 because the previous administration was a little bit more antagonistic to the cryptocurrency industry. And so then when Trump took office, there was high anticipation about some things that way. I think part of the tariffs and other things of that nature is it kind of, people just get concerned about things and they sell and go to the dollar to liquidate some stuff. So yes, I am concerned about volatility personally. And so that's why I don't hold dollars, because I found that if you look at a historical trend with Bitcoin relative to the dollar, you will see that over any length of time, the dollar has lost significantly. Now, a little tongue-in-cheek there, but there is volatility is a concern. Depending if I had to, if I absolutely needed a certain amount of dollars because I'm going to pay my mortgage payment in dollars and I'm going to pay my utility bill in dollars, and I've got expenses in dollars, I need to have some dollars set aside. And if I don't have the liquidity to and willingness to risk that volatility, I need to have dollars to store as a 3 to 6 month living expenses and such. So it does. Bitcoin is volatile. It's now a $1.7 trillion asset. Could it still have an 80% drawdown, which is what it had 5 years ago? Could, but it's getting to the point now with global adoption and use and things like that where the volatility is smoothing out somewhat. It is down. It went from 109 to about 76 over the last 3 months, and now at around 84, 85 today. So I'm not going to tell you that it's not. It's the safest thing. For me, I think it's pretty safe money because I think it's going to be the world's future purchasing power. So that's how I'm approaching it. But in the interim, could have some volatility against the dollar. Let's go here. You had his hand up for a while. Yeah. Any insights into commodity-based stablecoins? I'd be open if anybody else has some input there. Stablecoins are coins tied to the dollar specifically or to some other sort of hard asset. Typically, those, again, are tied to the dollar, but also to the treasuries where they're getting the interest on that. I think the dollar that can be continued to multiply and added to in number is always going to go down against a scarce asset like Bitcoin, all things being the same. So again, if I had bought a stable coin on Trump's inauguration day, I'd be better off than having Bitcoin because Bitcoin went down in that interim. But over the next 5-10 years, I don't think a stable coin is going to outperform Bitcoin in terms of purchasing power. Yes.
I'm struggling to understand how it has value other than a bunch of people agree it has value, and is that kind of how the dollar works? It's like, I thought the dollar had value initially because it was gold backed. Well, then it wasn't gold backed. And then it still continues to have value because it's currently, or at least for now, the world's reserve currency. But I don't understand where Bitcoin gets its value.
Yes. Great question, and it requires a little bit of faith, as it does with just about every currency. I would say in some respects, our U.S. dollar is backed by $36 trillion of debt, and that Bitcoin is backed by energy, which is the only thing that cannot be counterfeited. So you cannot create more energy. You can only harness and leverage energy. And so the mining process itself validates, to a degree, the value of Bitcoin. Yes, at the end of the day, it is the thing that we trade with. It is the thing that we agree has some value, but it's a bunch of zeros and ones at the end of the day. And I'm trading my zeros and ones on the Bitcoin ledger for some zeros and ones that you want to hold in your wallet on the Bitcoin ledger. And is there really any value to that? But today I've got a piece of paper with a dead president on it. Is that what says that that's worth something? Yeah. It's every 10 minutes earning the energy. Yes, as the proof of work for that. Now, could it go? Yeah, could it go to zero? Sure, but I would argue that the world is clamoring for a stable currency that cannot be manipulated, and so that's the value that the fact that it's scarce, the fact that nobody controls it, the fact that it's easily transferable. Those are the things that give it its value. My cell phone, doesn't have a lot of intrinsic value. I've got some gold and some little components and some stuff in there, but if I was to melt it down, there's really not a lot. But yet, boy, you take my phone away, and boy, my life's upended for a while, right? And so the same, I think, can be said about just about a lot of digital assets that have value just because of the network upon which they're built and how it's used. In the back, yeah.
So it seems like it's not really tangible.
No, it's not tangible. That's part of its beauty.
But back to the question that, in your opinion, you're thinking that with time, there's so much demand for this, for the things that it brings, equalization and things like that, that it will take over currency as we know it today.
I have that view, yes.
How many other people are there like you?
More every day. Is there capital gains tax, and how do they find out? Yes, there is. Currently, the Bitcoin is considered a commodity. So when you buy it at, say, 85,000 and you sell it at 100, you have to claim that $15,000 of capital gain. Even if you just bought a portion, you bought at when it was 85 and it went to 100, and now there's a capital gain. Short-term capital gains, long-term capital gains, depending on how long I hold it. How do they find out? Today, you cannot buy Bitcoin without going through an exchange for which they're going to want know your customer types of information. You're going to give your name, address, social security number. It's going to be just like you bought it as a stock, as an ETF. So you're pretty well limited to. There's not really a good way to hide it. Now, somebody knows that you bought Bitcoin on this day, at this time, at this price. And then where it goes from there and how you're supposed to then keep track of it, identify, did I just move it from one wallet to another and I still own it? Or did I actually use it to go buy something? And if so, it'd be like saying I sold my Apple stock to go buy a new car. I have to report the capital gain or loss on my Apple stock to go buy a new car. Same even if the car dealership took Bitcoin, I still have to claim a gain or loss on the transaction. That said, there is some legislation being suggested that Bitcoin be considered a currency without capital gains. I don't expect that to pass anytime soon, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. All right, well, we are maybe one or two more questions, and then, yeah, Dr. Cotter. Anything. You cannot here in America, but many countries of the world you can, and local economies of the world are accepting Bitcoin again because perhaps in their currency that's getting debased very rapidly, they want to hold something, and especially in a country where you're limited to holding actual pieces of paper, getting robbed, or other things. Here I can hold something digitally that's intangible, and that as long as I know my password, I can access those funds. So yeah, I think there's numerous uses. Again, this is a 16-year-old asset. 16 years ago, there was a guy on a computer cranking out these things called the Bitcoin tokens, and it wasn't until a year or so later that somebody said, okay, I'll sell you a pizza for 10,000 of those. And then it kind of went from there. So for where we are, 16 years into the cycle, for having a $1.7 trillion asset, I think, and no marketing team, no group behind it, whatever, I think it's very far down the track. And technologies are being written, a lot of what's being held up, as soon as they remove capital gains taxes, you'll see huge adoption. Businesses, everybody's going to be wanting to trade in Bitcoin. All right. Well, I'll hang around for a few more questions, but turn it over here now to Greg. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep.
Please join me in thanking Tim for this. So thank you all for joining us this evening. I hope you have a pleasant evening and a safe drive home.